YouTube, we are back and feeling refreshed after quite a great time at Nats, this past weekend. Speaking of Nationals, Jarrell is putting together a lot of vlogs and footage that we took at Nationals for you guys, so be on the lookout for that video. And we are actually going to be filming a personal reflection, Jarrell and I, on our experiences, what our matchups were like, what decks we ran, and what our overall experience, both from a player's perspective and a convention perspective, will be in that video. I personally had a great time. Shout out to everybody that I played against. I had a lot of fun during my matches. Everybody was great. It was a great vibe, and I learned a lot from really high-level players. Everybody I played with, taught me something during that round. So shout out to everybody that, I encountered during that. I had a hell of a time, and, thank you for the games. But that being said, we do have some deck profiles for you to talk about and discuss. The first one we're going to talk about today is Anubismon, which arguably is probably the best deck of the format. I initially thought about trying to get these videos out towards the beginning of the meta as I was starting to do testing and deck building, but as I play tested and as I was talking to some of my friends about it, my deck builds evolved and my way of piloting the deck also evolved and kept changing. So I didn't want to put out a video that was sort of rough around the edges and not a finalized build for you guys. So I said, look, let's be thorough about it. Let's go to Nats. Let's see how people play it. Let's learn about the deck as I see more Anubis running around, testing against it, playing with it. So I think this is a more refined, more polished version of what I would be able to turn out for you guys. And lastly, most of you have already seen that Anubis took the entire tournament. And I wanted to take this moment to just have a huge shout out to the homie Bryce for taking the dub, for being first place, for playing one fucking amazing tournament, man. Like, you absolutely crushed it, dude. Like, watching you play round by round and then watching you on the stage was just a huge privilege, and being able to, watch you just cook. If you're looking for high level play, I highly recommend you watch the finals match that was streamed through Bandai's channel. Like, that was just an amazing match and something that I think I'm personally striving towards. And for those new players out there, like, watch that game and you'll know what high level play is. But that being said, I'm gonna stop fanboying over here. Shout out again to you, Bryce. You earned it, my man. But back to Anubis, right? Anubis is a deck, that I think is extremely fast, extremely strong, and extremely versatile. At its core, Anubis pretty much embodies everything that Purple as an archetype wants to do, and I think really has established itself as the premier Purple deck of this format, and if not, just the card game in general. I think this is Purple's probably strongest deck ever, and I'm really excited to talk about it with you guys today. As usual with the deck profiles that we have on this channel, the first part will focus on card choices, ratios, and tech choices. We then will move on to a more discussion-focused section going over early game setups, starting hand picks, and sort of alternative tech choices to help string your plays along. And lastly, before we really get into the real chunk of this video, I just wanted to say a huge thank you for everybody tuning in, both new and old viewers. If you're new to the channel, hopefully this video helps convince you to keep tuning in and hit that subscribe button. For those who are returning day in and day out, we can't thank you enough for your continued support. It really does mean a lot. For those of you who recognized us at Nats and kind of gave us a quick shout out, real big thank you to you guys. That made my weekend, that made Jarrell's weekend. It was great running into you all and meeting you all in person. So huge thank you for that. Without further ado, let's hop right into the video over here. Alrighty guys, so starting off with our eggs, we've got 4 of the BT6 Sunamon. I think pretty standard egg for Anubis decks right now. Being able to, once per turn, draw a card every time you pitch a card from hand is really good for cycle and just finding your pieces. Really no other reason to run another egg, so I think pretty self-explanatory there. Moving on to the rookies, we do run one Gazimon as a memory floodgate and Psychmon, 2 of, as your sort of player reduction floodgate. I think Psychmon has more of a place in today's meta, and particularly more so in the mirror match compared to Gazimon. I think both do work, and you definitely have value in both. but I think Psychmon is just a lot more stronger, I think, going into the mirror, and very strong going against other decks too. There is a world where I try to bump him up to a 3 of, just because I think he holds a lot of value, but for right now we're just going to be running it as a 2 of. We do try to sneak in 2 Labramon. You know, I think being able to, in the more grindier, long-lasting matches, being able to cycle through and pick up a piece that you're missing, like a missing Anubis, for example, I think does have a lot of value and a lot of implication, which is why I wanted to sneak Labra in there. The Inheritable also synergizes very well with the deck as well, so I don't think there's a reason to cut him completely. We do run 3 Goblimon, the Inheritable to gain a memory when you pitch a card from your hand. Again, just synergizes very well with the deck and makes an already efficient deck even more efficient. So we do run Gobly at a 3 of. And to round out the rookies, we do run 4 Ignitemon. Just pairs very, very well with Mervamon and helps you gain more memory and keep turn when you string on your Anubis effect. So I think Ignite at a 4 of is a must. It's when attacking to pop one of your Digimon to pop one of your opponent's Digimon on the same level. Never really comes up for me, if I'm going to be honest with you. I really just use it for the Digi-crossing with Merva. Next, moving on to the level 4s. We do run 2 of the promo Saberdramon. Very, very good card. We'll talk about him later on in the video a little bit more in detail, but having Raid and Retaliation is just really, really good. Very good for control, very good for board presence, and also very good for just dealing with opponents' big bodies. Because with Retaliation, you can just go ahead, Raid, and there you go. You know, you're potentially popping an opponent's level 6 on top of Anubis popping multiple level 5s if you can string the combo plays along. So really, really good, I think, for just aggression and removal. We do run 1 Black Gautamon Uber. This card came up clutch in the finals matchup, which Bryce played in, which there should be a video up later on, either this week or it may already be uploaded depending on our schedule. But the national champion was on our channel. You know, be on the lookout for that video. Should be a fun one to watch. But he really, I think, sold this tech to me. Being able to bottom deck cards from your opponent's trash is just huge. Not just in the mirror, but I think in matches like SecCon, as we saw, like I said, the mirror matchup and other decks like D-Brigade, for example, like bottom decking certain pieces that your opponent may need can come up big time. And I think this guy is a sneaky tech to definitely throw in there. We do run 1 Soulmon for additional DP boost for all your Retaliation bodies. You know, that plus 2k can come up clutch. Sometimes you do, you know, it doesn't really matter, but the fact that it has Retaliation can buff up your bodies and synergizes well with Mervamon is the reason I try to sneak him in there. If you're missing out on Sabers, or, you know, they're too expensive or they're not really accessible in your area, I think Soulmon is a pretty decent substitute, but I do think he does warrant at least a spot in the deck for sure. And we will be running 4 Ogremon. Again, just synergizes very well with Anubis. The Inheritable is the exact same as Goblimon, where if you're to trash a card from hand once per turn, you gain a memory, which is the same as it's sort of your turn or your main phase turn, where again, if you trash a card by effect from your hand, you gain a memory. So again, just making a deck that is already super memory efficient even more so, and just provides really, really good value. And the last level 4 that we're running is Doberman X Antibody, mainly for the Retaliation package. You know, this gives a Digimon on your field Retaliation. You can choose which one to give it to. So I think really good to be played out with Mervamon. And the Inheritable, again, when you play out a Digimon by effect, you gain a memory. Just adds to your efficiency, right? So you don't even mind Digivolving as part of your stack with Doberman. Moving on to the level 5s, we've got 2 Maycrack Vicious Mode, really just to help with annoying floodgates that you can deal with. Being able to just deal with these level 3s by playing out a Maycrack is always good value. Another thing that is really nice is that it's a 6 cost, so in theory you can play out a Maycrack for free off of Anubis's effect, which helps you do multiple things, right? You can do the memory floodgate popping that we've already talked about, but you can also do another play where you can just set up a second Anubis, right? And have your opponent now deal with 2 Anubises where they're kind of stuck in a position where if they really can't pull something out of the hat, they've lost next turn, right? So I think Maycrack is a really good tech level 5. We are running 1 Lady Devimon from BT3. She's more of a tech card, I feel like, or a flex card. I feel like I could definitely change her out for another Maycrack. I could change her out for maybe like another level 5 that provides value. But I do see a world where she becomes just a 3rd Maycrack. But I did like her ability, like particularly in the early game, just to cycle and set up your trash. Her inheritable really doesn't come up too often. So like I said, a flex spot for sure. Moving on to Blue Meramon from BT11. I think this guy is probably one of the better level 5s, if not the best level 5 for the deck. Being able to cycle and set up your trash and have retaliation is really nice. And also being able to gain a memory once per turn when you play out a Digimon by effect, once again, just adds to the efficiency and the extreme turbo nature that this deck is all about. Moving on to the level 6s, we've got 2 Leviamon. This Kaiju boy is just really, really good. You know, being able to pop multiple bodies, gain memory, and have that aggression with check +1 at 13k, I think just has a lot of value all in one card. And as you can see, like a lot of the theme here is just value, right? You want your plays to have a lot of value, which I think is very, very important in this deck. You know, it's very easy to fall into the trap of, let me just spew out bodies and do boom, boom, boom. Like, it's easy to sort of brain dead your way through this deck, but I do think that players that are better off with this sort of play style and the next level players kind of think about what they want to do and think about the value that each card brings to the table. And will I tell you, this guy brings a lot of value to the table. Being able to board control, provide aggression, and also provide memory manipulation is really good. You know, his memory gain effect, remember, is an all turns effect. So it's definitely going to be proccing off. So be wary of this guy, and we'll definitely be talking about him later on in the video. And then to wrap out the level 6s, we have to run the alt-arted package of 4 Mervamon and 4 Anubismon. These 2 cards right here are sort of the heart and soul of what you want to be doing. Being able to get into Anubis to play out Mervamon for a very reduced cost, if not free, is the win button for this deck. Getting out Merva, spewing out bodies, having board pressure in a board state is what you want to do, and these 2 cards are all about it. We won 1 Ruin Mode and 1 Death X. There was a time where I was running 2 Ruin Mode, but I felt 2 was a little bit too clunky for my liking. I think 1 of is good because it does help you find a way to just slow down your opponent for 1 more turn. And Death X obviously is just very useful for dealing with wide board scenarios. So I think both of these are, they provide a good amount of value to the deck. Death X also, of note, can come out with Anubis for a reduced cost. So there have been times where I sneak out Death X with Anubis just to kind of make it a little bit more cost efficient. But again, in this meta where there's a lot of wideboarding, Death X can come up huge. Moving on to the options, we run 1 Calling from Darkness. This one's debatable. You know, I've seen people who love it, some people don't love it. I'm sort of on the fence about it. I can definitely see myself cutting it for like another Ruin Mode or another Death X, or even just another level 5 for consistency's sake. But there have been also moments where I'm like, look, I'm missing a Ruin Mode and I really want to see it, or I'm missing an Anubis and I really want to see it, but I just can't draw into it. Sometimes it's nice to just pop a lower body, bring back Anubis, and just be able to Digivolve into it. So I'm keeping it in here for now, but I can definitely see myself taking it out later on. And then we just round it out with a standard 3 Purple Memory Boost and 4 Wisdom Training. Again, both cards just for search, cycle, and providing that extra bit of efficiency and memory gain to help string your plays along. So that'll do it for the deck profile. The photo will be in the video description down below, as well as at the end of the video itself. Let me know what you guys think, but before you do, we're going to be hopping right into a more in-depth discussion on how I pilot the deck, some tech choices, and how to set your board up. Alright, so let's talk about what Anubis wants to do, right? So Anubis is a deck that I think is personally mistaken as an OTK deck because of just how fast and suffocating it is. It's really not an OTK deck though, you know, in my opinion, it's more of that like old school Merva-Rush deck, but taken to that next level. I think the main mantra of this deck is really, I have Anubismon out, it's up to you to deal with it, otherwise I will probably have game in 1 to 2 turns. And I think that's really how you should approach this deck, is get Anubis out as quickly as possible. If your opponent deals with it, that's fine, but know that they'll probably have to commit a lot of resources to getting rid of Anubis, which will give you, in turn, more resources to set up your next Anubis and just keep draining and chipping away at them that way. And if they can't deal with it, well, then you likely have game within the next 1 to 2 turns. With this deck, with the right setup, you really want to be using Anubismon to bring out Mervamon. Mervamon then brings out additional bodies, which then floods the board and really just controls the board state and gives your opponent a very difficult board state to overcome. I think it really utilizes the tried and tested purple ideology of setting up your trash and bringing cards back, utilizing on-play effects of both the cards you bring back as well as the effects of Anubis to, again, control the board state and basically say, look, I did my big play, respond or die, right? And like I said, Anubis has a lot of ways to deal with your opponent's board, not by just wideboarding, but also through rush, retaliation, and it has an inherent ability to pop level 5 or lower Digimon whenever a Digimon is played out by effect. Which, if you pair that out with Mervamon, is absolutely insane and absolutely cracked. On top of it being a whenever you play it out, it's not a once per turn effect. It can pop off multiple times, which is absolutely just insane. And I think playing more and more with it, playing more against it, I mean, I understand why they chose to limit this card. You know, you can definitely make a case to say Mervamon should have been the one that got hit and not Anubis, but that's a discussion for another day, right? So moving on to what you want to see from your starting hand, all I'm really going to say is that you want a resemblance of a starting line, right? You want a level 3. I ideally would look for a Goblimon or an Ignitemon, but you really just want some resemblance of a line so that you can start building your stack as quickly as possible. Which is why I will also say having a training or a mem boost in hand is also really good to have, just because, you know, if you can play them out early, particularly your trainings, you're able to cycle a whole lot, pick up pieces that you need, and then go into your level 5s and level 6s in a much more efficient way, which is scary in a deck that is already extremely efficient. This just allows you to turbo into your Anubis as quickly as possible, which, like I said, is your win button. You know, getting Anubis out is how you win the game. You want to do that as quickly as possible. I will also say this too, you know, being able to just get those trainings and those boosts early is just, I think, much better than having to play them late game. So don't be shy about like, oh, I've got to get this out by turn 1 or turn 2. You know, you don't have to. As long as you're able to find your pieces, be patient, this deck will play itself. Like, it's a very, very, very efficient deck in that way. So don't be afraid to just slam down trainings and boosts to get things set up in the right way. Now, as you're climbing up your stack, you'll notice that you are doing a lot of cycling and you're also doing a lot of trash setup. So you need to know what to pitch and what to keep. I usually will say that you don't want to pitch your big bodies too early, you know, because Anubismon is still a 4 in this deck, and there will be times where you don't see Anubis right away, even if you're cycling and using your searching pieces. And that's okay. And that's why I say keep those level 6s in hand, because sometimes there are moments where you just have to hard digivolve into a Leviamon, hard digivolve into a Mervamon, and that's still an okay play, because both of those cards still hold pretty good value and can put your opponent on some level of pressure. So I would say until you can go into your Anubis, keep those cards in hand. You know, pitch your level 4s out early, pitch your Saber Dramons, pitch your Doberman X's, pitch your Solmons early, and keep your bigger bodies in your hand. And then once you can go into Anubis, that's when you can really start to just pitch those level 6s and put them in trash. Saber Dramon, just to kind of do a quick highlight on this guy, I think is really, really good. Really key part to this deck. He is expensive, so I do see where people will be like, do I really need him? I would say the price will drop. Nationals really caused this card to spike, but with Nets being done and no real other major tournaments left to play, I do see Saber Dramon dropping in price. I do think he is vital for this deck because Raid Retaliation is a huge mechanic to help you control the board, on top of what Anubis can already do, right? So I do think having Saber Dramon is helpful, but we'll go over some alternative card choices towards the end of the video if you don't have access to Saber. So moving on to the combo play, like I said, I will usually try to have a boost or training out initially to help my plays be more efficient, but don't be shy to just push out a stack if you don't have them on board. You know, they're not necessary to string your combo plays along, but they do make your big plays even more devastating when you have them ready to go. I will push out with a level 4, usually with like an Ogremon or sometimes a Doberman X. Your ideal level 5 to go into is BT11 Blue Meramon. The when Digivolving effect of this card is huge because it allows you to cycle by drawing 2, but by pitching 2, you can proc your inheritables to gain more memory and make your turbo play even more efficient. You know, Goblimon and Ogremon from BT13 both have the inheritable to gain a memory if you pitch a card from hand. So this allows you to turbo into Blue Mera for a cost of 1. If you proc the training, it essentially makes your Blue Mera a free Evo. And then you can go into Anubis to pitch additional 3 cards. Like I said earlier, you can then pitch your Mervas, your Levias to really make a devastating play, right? You pitch 3 cards, you can bring out Merva for a reduced cost of 3 to start. Then you can reduce Merva's cost to play by Digicrossing with an Ignite or a Merva to reduce it by an additional 3, right? So now you've reduced it by 6, and you can potentially gain memory by Ignitemon, Blue Meramon, which could make Mervamon essentially like, you know, for example, a 2 cost, sometimes even free. So being able to spit her out for that cheap of a cost, I think is just huge, you know? And then on top of that too, being able to get a wide board of Digimon ready to go for next turn, I think is just absolutely devastating for your opponent. And being able to pop level 5s every time something gets played out just destroys their board, makes it so that your board is much more suffocating and much more devastating and harder to deal with, you know? And now they're looking at this situation of, well, I've got to commit a lot. I need to make a play, otherwise I'm dead, right? And that's really what Anubis is all about. Moving on to some alternative plays, like I said, if you don't have a Mervamon or you're not seeing her, you're not seeing your Anubises, I mean, Leviamon still is a very, very viable top end. Whether you're hard playing it, whether you're digivolving into it, or whether you're bringing it back with Anubis, being able to pop multiple bodies, gain memory, is huge. I think the way that the effect is worded also is very, very clutch, because it says that you can pop both the highest and the lowest level. Now, if your opponent has 1 body on board, that is a both highest level, and that's both a lowest level. So you can target that Digimon twice, which is huge for decks like War Greymon, which have deletion protection, decks like Machine Dramon as well to help strip sources, and really just does a whole lot of control, you know, in that way. And it having an inherent +1 security check at 13k, if that boy sticks, it's swinging for 2 checks at 13k, which is also huge for aggression and tempo. So I think Leviamon is definitely a very, very good play, whether, like I said, it's a hard Evo or bringing it out with Anubis. Also note that you don't necessarily have to pitch 3 cards every time with Anubis. You can pitch 1, right? And reduce the play cost by 1 and bring out something for cheap. to help maybe choke your opponent. You can pitch 3, bring out a level 3, bring out a Gazi, bring out a Psych, or bring out a Labramon to help recycle cards, right? I say that because number 1, it just gets a body out on board, and because you play by effect, you can either gain memory, you can draw cards, and more importantly, you can pop a level 5 off of that. Don't forget, you can just bring out a level 3 to pop something. And that helps you with your board control and maintaining your board state until, you know, you've set up your trash in the right way, which doesn't take very long in this deck that likes to pitch and recycle. So I just think that there's so much you can do with this deck to not just be super aggressive, but also be super control-y. So I think there's a lot of tools that you have access to with Anubis that really go into that gameplay. You know, next thing to talk about would be some tech cards. You know, I did see a few people running the starter deck Matashita from the Metal Garurumon starter deck, the memory setter that allows you to gain a memory when you pitch a card from hand. I think it's pretty good. You know, I see the reasoning behind it. I personally am not running it, but you know, the folks that I've played against, when I talked to them about it, they were saying, you know, establishing a mat early on can be very helpful because you're able to assure yourself 3 memory. If you have to go into Anubis, you can pretty much gain back turn because your memory efficiency is such that you don't need all 3 memory to do what you want to do. You can keep turn and potentially just keep swinging on turn with your rush retaliation body. So having a mat early game can be pretty helpful, and that definitely did come into play. I saw some folks running Biting Crush, which is really good for the mirror match, being able to threaten your opponent to say, look, you can do Anubis things if you want to, that's fine. I'm just gonna bring out a Leviamon from trash and pop your bodies. You know, I think Biting Crush is expensive, but a good sort of like threat, you know, like I'm gonna say, look, you can do what you want to do, but I'm gonna respond right away. You know, I did see one player run Chimeramon, which did come up against me. It's not a common tech, but I do see the reasoning behind it. Being able to bring out a ton of level 4s via Mervamon effect and say, look, like I need one more swing, or I need an additional way to get into another level 6. Chimera is really good for that. And I do see some utility in that. And I'm definitely going to try to tweak my build a bit to see if I can sneak a Chimeramon in there. And lastly, I did want to talk about some replacements for Saberdramon. Like I said, I personally think that Saberdramon is an important card for this deck. And if you can get your hands on it, I definitely would recommend it. I do think the price will continue to drop, so keep an eye out for that price drop. But if you can't get your hands on Saber, I say good replacements are cards like Soulmon from BT11. I would say like running more Dober X's can also be helpful. And I also do think cards like Gatomon Uber is definitely something that you can pump up as well to help with additional sort of mirror match control or utility control on your opponent. But I do think, again, if you can get your hands on Saber, you should try to, but those are definitely good replacements for it. Some folks are also running Porcupamon, which is a good way to pop sort of annoying floodgates and level 3s. So those, I think, would be my selections for any sort of replacements for Saberdramon. And that does wrap it up for the deck. Here is an overall photo for the deck profile, which I will link in the video description down below. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, you know, with these deck profiles, do let me know what you think. Let me know what you think would be better, what would be a more optimal play, what sort of suggestions you would have for ratios or piloting, you know, nuances. I'm open to hearing them, open to learning more about the deck. And I know that there are a lot of people out there who have suggestions, you know, and I would love to hear them. You know, I want to grow along with you guys, and this is one way to do so. So thank you all for tuning in. As always, as I said before earlier on in the video, if you're new, hopefully this was enough to convince you to keep tuning in. So hit that subscribe button. And for those of you who are always tuning in, thank you for all your support. Be on the lookout for more deck profiles as the week goes along with more national videos that we'll be putting together for you all. Hope you guys enjoy this and the videos that are to come. And we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.